I am your voice.
Stop for a second and think about this. Donald Trump is the President of the United States. Again, half the country is celebrating, while the other half is spiraling into shock, anger, and anxiety, while he's having the time of his life. How did the man many call the most repulsive politician of the 21st century, manage to do it twice? Are his voters fascists? Are his voters blind to his lies, his gaslighting, his obnoxious persona? Or is there an uncomfortable truth out there in the world that set the scene for people like Trump? The truth that made many people feel left behind, and behind the scenes prepared the sentiment for hate and resentment towards minorities and democracy altogether. Today, we will talk about why Trump won and how politics failed to serve the people it was supposed to represent.
When you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything.
Let's pause for a second and ask, what exactly is Trump selling us? Because at first glance, his message can sound pretty attractive. He fights for real Americans against a corrupt group of powerful elites. He says big problems are actually simple and only sound complicated because elites want to keep you in the dark. He calls our current system undemocratic, so he'll tear down anything that blocks the will of the people. This brand of thinking falls under something called right-wing populism. Put simply, it's the idea that society is split into two groups: the everyday, honest folks and the small, selfish elite. The right-wing part usually adds national pride, a tough stance on outsiders, and a call for law and order, even if that means tearing up old traditions. But hold on, let's rewind a little. Isn't this something that makes actually sense? Is this just another liberal narrative and agenda now? It's pretty clear that there is a financial and political elite in the US having more power than the average people. It's also clear that they are not interested in changing the status quo and that the media often lies. And as we'll see the ways in which politics often work, they are quite undemocratic sometimes. So before we label Trump either a savior or a villain, let's break down what liberal democracy actually means and why it matters so much. Now, don't blink. This next part is huge. Yascha Mounk defines liberal democracy as a system that does two big things. First, it lets the people pick their leaders through fair elections. Second, it protects everyone's basic rights, like free speech and freedom of worship. Put simply, a liberal democracy is both liberal, it guards your personal freedoms, and democratic. Your vote actually shapes the laws. These built-in rules keep leaders in check, so nobody can seize too much power and start doing whatever they want. But here's the twist. Donald Trump says the US isn't truly democratic at all, and this is the reason people see it as failing. He claims we need illiberal tools like stronger executive powers to force real changes. Why would millions of people cheer for that? Why put a leader in office who might roll back individual rights just so he can get things done? To answer that, we first need to see how the system have failed regular Americans in the first place. How did America go from a land of promise to a place where so many people feel left behind? Yascha Mounk, in his book People vs. Democracy, says that American democracy grew strong during a time of big economic success. Between 1935 and 1960, the standard of living for the average family doubled. Then from 1960 to 1985, it doubled again. Most people believed life would keep getting better, and inequality didn't seem like a big problem. White Americans held most positions of power. The media was tightly controlled, and immigration rarely made headlines. But then the 1980s ended, and changes started happening. The economy still grew, but most new money went to a small, very rich group. Trickle-down economics did not really trickle down that much. Tax cuts for the rich and smaller help for the poor made life harder for many. Look at these facts. From 1986 to 2012, the US GDP grew by 59%, while corporate profits went up over 280%. But only 1% of the total wealth generated went to the bottom 90% of households. 42% went to the top 0.1%. Tax cuts by Presidents Reagan and Bush, along with cuts in social services, fueled even more inequality. Look at one striking contrast. 9 out of 10 people born in 1940 earn more than their parents by age 30. But for those born in 1980, only 1 in 2 out-earned their parents. While this was going on, people in Congress started to live better and better. These representatives were not recognizable for most Americans. They spoke jargon, wore expensive suits, and appeared busy, while sucking up to interest groups paying for their re-elections to push policies not benefiting everyone else but the elites. Of the people, by the people, for the people, seemed to be crumbling. While the government was opening new wars, progressives spoke about a utopia coming to the US or already being there, where the only thing left to do is fight for the rights of immigrants, trans people, tackling racism, the drug problem of America. It wasn't just about jobs. Gridlock in Congress stopped big reforms. Bureaucracy expanded, with agencies popping up and slowing progress. Courts, led by judges not elected by voters, kept blocking or altering policies. Big banks and major corporations seemed to skate by when things went wrong, while ordinary people struggled with debt and no relief in sight. The 2008 financial crisis highlighted this divide. Institutions got bailouts from the federal government, but homeowners and small business often got nothing. President Obama made the tough call to stop a deeper crash, but many felt betrayed, as though they paid the bill while the rich were saved. And what happened after? Before answering that question, I'd really appreciate if you subscribe, because most of you watching are not following the channel just yet. By clicking the subscribe button, you can support me bringing regular analysis on US politics in a hopefully balanced, non-propaganda way. I really appreciate it. And now enter Donald Trump, an unorthodox contender in the world of politics many consider an impossible outsider. But for many, he promised to bring a change in an era where nothing has changed for those watching. Inspired by other right-wing populists in Europe, Trump pointed out how undemocratic the United States have become and promised to drain the swamp and bring back the America people were told about. A great America again. And the people gave him a mandate again. And this time, Trump wasted no time. He claimed it was him and the people against the elite. So he set out to dismantle the institutions he thought stood in the way. Critical media outlets? Throw out these mouthpieces for leftist elites who had tricked the public. Check. Judges who blocked his agenda? Undemocratic activists standing in the path of the real will of the people. Out with them too. Check. NGOs, foundations, and global treaties? Only stealing jobs through fraudulent spending and waste for DEI and climate rules. Out with them too. Check. While almost half of the voters look at the events in disgust and horror, the other half of them sees something else. And to be clear, in my opinion, they aren't cheering for fascism. They are cheering for someone who finally seems to be doing something. To these supporters, democracy had already failed them, so why defend the broken system? But while he breaks things, does he really fix anything? Is America about to become great again, or simply more divided? Trump once promised to drain the swamp, but he didn't do it in his first term, and he is not doing it now. Why not? Well, because his actions clash with his own promises on lobbying, tax cuts, and welfare. Take a look at the core contradiction. Trump says he wants to bring back a nostalgic version of America, a time when the middle class thrived and the economy grew quickly. But how did that era happen in the first place? It happened in large part because tax money was spent on public goods and programs that helped people more than just the wealthy. So how's Trump really trying to do it? Tax cuts, mostly aimed at rich donors and allies, but if you cut taxes for the wealthiest, where does the money come from to fund big projects and social programs? Well, this is Trump's second policy, balancing budget by cutting spending on programs.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy.
And already, the social welfare of America is only a shadow of its past self. 2 decades ago, 68% of families with children in poverty received cash assistance via welfare. Today, only 26% do. The US is sort of like a growing streaming provider. slowly realizing growth isn't sufficient, and they start to reduce the quality of the service, bringing in ads, lowering video quality, and raising prices. Trump might drain one swamp, but he's building a new one in its place. Without enough tax money, the government relies on debt and pressuring old allies to help fill the gap. Let's take Doge as an example. Some say it's a new source of revenue, but the US budget is $6.8 trillion. Even if you eliminated 237 to 500 billion in waste, which is estimated, that's only about 3 to 6% of the total budget. This means that even if Doge finds all of the waste, their work is more like a mirage. But to be fair, I see this effort more as a disguise where the administration can start cutting essential programs as well, which will not be easy to bring back once a budget is so heavily in debt and unbalanced. Therefore, no, I don't think Trump is going to fix it. Well, I'm sure I've upset some people on both the left and the right by now, but here is what we need to remember. People on the left sometimes forget that the average person on the other side isn't hoping for fascism. Many of them just want change, no matter the cost, because they feel ignored by politicians. And people on the right who cheer for destroying institutions need to see Trump's biggest contradiction. He wants to bring back a time of greater equality, yet he refuses to pay the bills to make that happen. Instead, he blames immigration, DEI, and bureaucracy and talks to our lesser instincts to solve all our problems. That might create more economic chaos than prosperity. Both sides need to realize that 90% of you all experience the same inequality and injustice. The thing that unites people in America is the collective struggle. The media and political narratives focus on the things that divide the population. Now, the road ahead is even more painful than the road that led here. Step one would be to separate money from power. Lawrence Lessig calls America Lesterland, where about 150,000 people, the number of folks named Lester, hold huge power over politics. Research shows a small group of wealthy donors has an outsized influence. Politicians spend 30 to 70% of their time fundraising, hanging out with people who aren't the voters they claim to represent. Want real change? Follow the money. Make sure election campaigns don't depend on big donors and special interests. Step 2. Invest in productivity through education and innovation. The economy has been struggling to keep growing, and there is a real need to increase productivity. Fortunately for us, the tools are known: research and education. And while AI can help push the narrative, there is a likelihood of people ending up useless because of it in the long run. As you all know, a Harari coined, the useless class is not only a problem because more and more people become obsolete, but also because the gains of the AI revolution will not be collectivized. It will not be equally distributed among people. Step 3. Fix the tax system. If we want to fund roads, schools, and social programs, we need fair taxes. That means raising money from those who can actually afford it. Rebuilding unions could also help workers have a stronger voice. Yes, it's a steep climb, but it's one path toward a better pay and safer workplaces. Step 4. Spend meaningfully. Once there is enough money in the federal budget, use it wisely. Address real problems like drug addiction, lack of education, and job opportunities. This isn't just about left or right, it's about doing the job voters expect. Step 5. Level-headed immigration policies. We also need an immigration plan that helps people who are already living here while still filling the gaps in our aging workforce. That's a delicate balance, but it's doable if we set aside fear and focus on facts. And last but not least, rethink nationalism. Nationalism, unfortunately, is a real problem once again in the 21st century. After the struggles of the Second World War, people who have lost their identities as workers, as coal miners, as honest working folks now identify as angry white men and women living in Chicago, for example. The left overall left a vacuum after leaving nationalism as a shadow of the past, only to be filled with the extreme right wing with an exclusionary focus on who the real Americans are and who aren't. If the left wants to regain the trust of the people it used to appeal to, it needs to provide a sense of shared identity of nationalism in an inclusive way. Otherwise, they'll abandon the symbols and the heritage of the countries and leave it for worse groups to pick it up. Pick it up for pride, anger, resentment to bring down those who left them behind. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate every one of you supporting my channel. If you agree or disagree with anything in the video, don't hesitate to leave a comment. I'm wrong often, and I'm open to hear feedback, criticism, or the opinion of people who disagree. And as always, I was your host Matt, and you were watching The White Club.